Welcome to Curiosity, the podcast where science meets wonder. Join us as we explore the fascinating, the innovative, and the unexpected, from the secrets of the cosmos to the marvels of everyday life. Each episode takes you on a journey to uncover the knowledge and stories that fuel our endless quest for understanding. Let your curiosity guide you.
You know, it's funny. You can walk into any restaurant anywhere in the world or watch a documentary about a culture that's been completely isolated for centuries. And there's this one fundamental thing that's just, it's always there. It's completely unavoidable.
Music.
Music, exactly. And it's not just that it's present. It's that it seems to be structurally a kind of universal human language.
And that universality is really the core of the mystery we're unpacking today. We're not talking about, why you might prefer pop to classical.
No, not at all.
We're talking about the truly incredible fact that if you go from, say, the deepest part of the Amazon rainforest to a nomadic camp in Mongolia to an ancient music school in China.
Places separated by thousands of years, thousands of miles.
Precisely. And the organized sound they all create, what they call music, shares the same foundational rules. Rules rooted in math, in physics, and in our own biology.
Okay, so let's get into that. We've got this huge stack of sources here, and they're pulling from acoustics, neuroscience, evolutionary biology, anthropology, all trying to answer this one question.
Why does this common language exist?
Yeah, why do we all hear and create the same basic structures?
And the core of this whole exploration is to understand what we're calling the deep constraints. You can think of them as these non-negotiable rules.
Like architectural limits.
That's a perfect way to put it. They're imposed by the physics of sound itself and by the cognitive architecture of our minds. And these constraints, they basically funnel the infinite possibilities of sound down into the remarkably consistent music that all humans create.
And when you say consistent, the features are so specific, it's honestly astounding.
They really are.
We're talking about the octave, that perfect 2-to-1 frequency ratio that's everywhere, the overwhelming use of the 5-note pentatonic scale.
The universal distinction between what sounds pleasing or consonant and what sounds clashing or dissonant.
And then you have the organization of time into rhythm and meter. These fundamental patterns like call and response or repetition with variation. It's a whole toolkit.
And what's really fascinating, as the sources show, is that the consistency isn't just in the structure, it's also in the function and the emotion of the music.
Right. I was struck by some of the examples here. For instance, mothers in Tokyo and mothers in Tanzania are cultures that couldn't be more different. They sing lullabies with eerily similar melodic shapes.
Almost universally, yes. They're slow, they're gentle, and they very often have this characteristic descending pitch quality, a kind of falling melody.
And that emotional consistency seems to hold for almost every category of music. Funeral music in, say, Ireland and Indonesia will both have that same somber, slow, descending quality.
It communicates and helps process grief. And on the flip side, war songs or chants across continents use similar tools, faster tempos, higher pitch ranges, intense rhythms to coordinate a group and manage collective aggression.
So this isn't just one culture learning from another. This suggests there's some kind of shared fundamental emotional wiring we all have. So our mission today isn't just to appreciate music, it's to uncover these deep rules of the universe and of our own bodies that are shaping our creativity.
Yeah.
Why does music even exist? And why these specific structures?
And to find that out, we have to start at the absolute foundation. We have to look at the physics. Before biology ever gets a say, the universe sets the rules.
Right. So sound isn't arbitrary. It's not just random noise. It follows mathematical laws that constrain what's possible and, maybe more importantly, what sounds stable or good to us. So the first, most universal feature we have to talk about is the octave. It is in every single musical system that has ever been studied.
From ancient Chinese court music to Australian Aboriginal didgeridoo traditions, it's everywhere. And the sources are really clear on this. It's a physical inevitability.
It's the ultimate constant. So this is not a cultural convention. It's not something we all just agreed on.
Not at all. It's an acoustic phenomenon. We all independently discovered it because it's literally built into the properties of any vibrating object.
So when two notes are an octave apart, the frequency of one is just exactly double the other.
A perfect 2.1 ratio. If you play a middle C on a piano, the next C up the keyboard vibrates at exactly twice the speed.
And that's why our brains hear it as the same note, just higher. We even give them the same letter name. Why do we process two different frequencies that way?
It's because of a principle called harmonics or overtones. When a string on a guitar vibrates or a column of air in a flute, it doesn't just produce that one single frequency you think you're hearing.
The fundamental pitch.
Exactly. It simultaneously produces a whole series of fainter vibrations at integer multiples of that fundamental. So 2 times the frequency, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, and so on.
And those overtones are always there. They're just part of the sound.
Always. They're physically inevitable. In fact, they're what give an instrument its unique timbre, why a violin and a trumpet sound different even when they play the same note.
It's the unique recipe of overtones.
It is, and the octave, that 2.1 ratio, is the very first and the strongest overtone in that series. It's so closely tied to the fundamental pitch that our brains basically interpret it as a recurrence of the original note. It's the clearest, most stable relationship possible.
So the octave is just the universe handing us a pre-made framework for organizing sound. Every culture found it because it's physically mandated. You can't avoid it.
It's the starting point. But the physics doesn't stop there. Once you move beyond the octave, you get into consonance and dissonance, which also have this deep physical basis in simple ratios.
This is a big one. For a long time, the idea that certain notes sound pleasant together, consonant, while others clash dissonant, that was thought to be purely cultural. Tastes change.
And culture certainly plays a huge role in how we use dissonance, but the fundamental preference has a physical basis. It's rooted in how sound waves align and how our inner ear actually responds mechanically.
Okay, break that down for us.
When 2 frequencies have a simple mathematical relationship, like the 3.2 ratio of a perfect fifth or the 4.3 of a perfect fourth, their sound waves line up in a very regular, predictable way.
They fit together nicely.
They do. It creates a smooth, blended wave pattern that our auditory system processes with very little effort. We perceive that smoothness as consonant or pleasing.
And when the ratios get messy, like the sources mention something like 45.32.
Well, that complexity creates what acousticians call beating patterns. The sound waves interfere with each other in complicated, rapidly fluctuating ways. They're literally fighting, canceling each other out at quick, irregular intervals.
So that roughness, that feeling of tension we hear, is actually the sound of physical chaos happening in our ears.
That's it, exactly. That physical roughness translates into a sensation of tension or even irritation in our auditory cortex. It's not an abstract feeling. It's a direct sensory response to physical interference.
That is profound. And it leads us directly to why the next most common intervals after the octave are the perfect fifth and the perfect fourth.
The 3.2 and 4.3 ratios, they appear universally because they are the next most stable, most consonant relationships after the 2.1 octave. These became the basic tools for building the very first scales.
We have to mention Pythagoras here.
Yeah.
The sources bring him up because this connects ancient philosophy directly to physical law.
Absolutely. The ancient Greeks, and Pythagoras is credited with this, they recognized that you could derive these stable, beautiful intervals just by manipulating string lengths, using simple whole numbers.
So if you shorten a string to 2/3 of its length,
you get a perfect fifth, the 3.2 ratio. If you shorten it to 3/4, you get a perfect fourth, the 4.3 ratio. This mathematical elegance was proof that music wasn't just arbitrary. It was applied arithmetic. It was an audible expression of universal order.
So the physical properties of vibrating objects basically handed humanity the perfect fifth and fourth on a silver platter.
And that's why every major musical tradition, from classical Indian music to early Chinese theory, independently centered their systems around these same intervals. It's a classic case of convergent evolution, but driven by acoustics.
They didn't need to have a meeting. The universe made the choice for them.
It did. And if you take that one interval, the perfect fifth, and you just apply it repeatedly, you naturally stumble upon one of the other great universals in music.
The 5-note or pentatonic scale.
The pentatonic scale. Its prevalence is one of the most compelling pieces of evidence for this whole idea of acoustic inevitability.
You find it everywhere. Children's songs, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star is pentatonic. Native American flute music, Celtic folk songs, the foundational music of ancient China.
And the beauty of it is how naturally it emerges from just stacking those perfect fifths. If you start on a note, go up by a perfect fifth, then take that new note and go up another fifth, and so on.
You generate a series of notes.
Exactly. And when you collapse those notes back down into a single octave, you're left with 5 distinct pitches. The pentatonic scale.
And the reason it's so common is that it's just inherently stable and pleasant.
Yes, because you've essentially built a scale where almost all the intervals are derived from those highly consonant, simple ratios. It cleverly excludes the two notes in a 7-note scale that create the most complex dissonant relationships.
The ones that cause the most friction.
Right, so it's almost impossible to write a melody in the pentatonic scale that sounds fundamentally wrong or tense. The acoustic properties themselves are guiding the creative choices towards stability.
Okay, so physics gives us the blueprint. The octave is the foundation, the consonant intervals are the pillars, and the pentatonic scale is like the first most common floor plan.
A very good analogy.
But to actually build this house of sound, we need the tools. And our primary tool, the first instrument, is our own body. And that brings in a whole new set of constraints.
Right. The laws of physics provide the raw material, but our biology provides the scaffolding. It gives us the filters and the processing mechanisms that decide which sounds get used and how they get organized.
And the most ancient and universal instrument we all share is the human voice. Our anatomy, the larynx, the vocal folds, that it imposes its own biological constraints.
And that's why vocal music has this incredible similarity across the globe. It's pure anatomy. All human vocal systems naturally produce pitches in a more or less similar range.
The sort of sweet spot.
Exactly. While a highly trained opera singer can obviously exceed these boundaries, the comfortable natural zone for the human voice is consistently between roughly 80 hertz and 1100 hertz. And that's true worldwide.
It's the range for comfort and projection, which explains why the bulk of melodies in every culture on Earth sit right in that same pitch area. It's not a cultural choice, it's just what our bodies can do without strain.
And this anatomical reality, it doesn't just affect pitch, it has a profound effect on time and phrasing.
The breath constraint, this is fascinating. We have to breathe, and that simple biological fact is just woven into the DNA of all music.
It is. You inhale, you sing a phrase, you exhale. This creates a universal pattern where musical phrases, especially in vocal music, typically last somewhere between 2 and 8 seconds.
Which is just the length of a comfortable breath cycle when you're singing or talking.
Right. Think about that for a second. The length of a musical phrase isn't decided by the composer's whim. It's decided by the lung capacity of the singer.
So the phrasing in a 17th century opera aria has a structurally similar length to a modern rap verse or a traditional work song.
In terms of duration, yes. The rhythmic and melodic complexity will differ wildly, of course, but the length of that chunk of information is tethered to our basic need for oxygen.
Okay, but here's a real cognitive puzzle related to our anatomy. The discretization mystery.
Ah, yes.
Physically, it's actually easier for our voice to slide continuously between pitches like a siren, but almost every musical culture chooses to organize pitch into discrete steps, scales, like keys on a piano. Why do we make that harder counterintuitive choice?
The explanation seems to be purely cognitive. Imagine trying to teach someone a melody if you only used continuous glides. It would be incredibly difficult to remember it accurately or reproduce it precisely.
It's too vague. There are no clear landmarks.
Exactly. Discretization, creating specific, nameable steps like C, D, E, is a cognitive solution to the problem of cultural transmission. Discrete pitches are profoundly easier for our memory to grab onto.
So I can sing a melody using those steps, you can learn it, and then you can teach it to someone else, and the melody stays intact across generations.
It turns the infinite possibility of pitch into a manageable, memorable set of rules. It makes music a shareable social technology.
Okay, let's shift from the body producing the sound to the brain processing it. Rhythm is the other huge universal, and the sources link this directly to what's called the auditory motor link.
Right. The universality of rhythm and meter is so deeply tied to our motor control systems. We don't just hear a beat, we feel it as an invitation to move.
The foot-tapping instinct.
That's it. When you hear a regular, predictable beat, the motor areas of your brain, specifically regions like the basal ganglia, they activate immediately, even if you're sitting perfectly still. Your brain is preparing your body to sync up.
So that powerful link between hearing and moving must have provided a huge evolutionary advantage.
It seems very likely. Rhythm was probably one of music's very first features precisely because it's so good at coordinating group movement.
Which is critical for a social species.
Absolutely. Think about all the ancestral activities that benefit from synchronization. Hunting together, building something, even fighting. Coordinated action is far more effective than a bunch of individuals acting randomly.
Armies marching to drums.
It's the perfect modern example. Rhythm is a technology for synchronizing human bodies to achieve a collective goal. It builds cohesion and improves efficiency.
So rhythm is the sound of us getting in sync. But music doesn't just make us move, it has to hold our attention. And that's where the brain's role as a prediction machine comes in.
This is so critical to understanding why music engages us emotionally. Your brain is not a passive listener. It's constantly scanning for patterns and trying to predict what's coming next.
And music is basically a game designed to play with that predictive system.
Brilliantly, yes. And the universal structure that it uses is repetition with variation.
It's inescapable.
And here's how it works. First, you present a pattern, a short melody or rhythm. The brain learns it and forms an expectation.
Okay, got it.
Then you repeat the pattern. The brain's prediction is confirmed, and for that success, it gets a tiny little reward, a measurable hit of dopamine.
The satisfaction of being right. I knew that was
Exactly. But if you just repeat it endlessly, the brain gets bored and tunes out. So the master stroke is that you then vary it slightly, you change a note, you alter the rhythm.
You violate the prediction.
And that violation creates a spike of interest. Surprise. The brain has to rapidly update its model, and that novelty recaptures our attention. It's this perfect dance between the comfort of predictability and the excitement of surprise.
And that's the core engine of everything from a simple verse-chorus pop song to a complex classical theme and variations.
Or the call-and-response patterns in West African music. The specific forms change, but the underlying cognitive mechanism establish a pattern, then play with it. That's just how our brains are wired to learn.
The sources even say that infants show measurable surprise when musical expectations are violated. So this is not learned, it's innate.
It seems to be. Music essentially hijacks our core pattern detection systems to generate these sophisticated emotional journeys.
Speaking of emotion, how can certain musical features reliably create the same feeling across completely different cultures?
This cross-cultural consistency of emotion is one of the strongest arguments for a biological basis for music's power.
The examples are so clear. Fast tempo plus a rising pitch is almost always heard as excited, happy, or maybe aggressive.
While a slow tempo with a descending pitch contour is almost universally perceived as sad, calm, or peaceful.
And the reason for this goes way back, doesn't it, to ancient mammalian signaling.
Yes. Think about how an animal vocalizes when it's aroused or aggressive. The sounds are naturally faster, louder, and higher pitched. It's the acoustic signature of high energy.
And when an animal is sad, or submissive, or hurt,
the vocalizations are slower, quieter, and lower pitched. The acoustic signature of low energy or distress.
So when we hear a frantic, high-pitched piece of music, we're not just learning from our culture that it's scary. We're reacting to a sound profile that for millions of years of evolution meant danger or high alert.
Precisely. Music didn't have to invent a new emotional language. It just adopted and then ritualized and elaborated on the acoustic signals for emotional states that were already deeply ingrained in our mammalian brains.
Which explains its immediate and profound power. It's tapping into systems that are far older than conscious thought. And that power leads us straight to the brain's ultimate reward system.
The dopamine circuit.
Right. We know music is motivating, but how does it get access to that core reward center, the one that's usually reserved for fundamental needs like food and sex?
Well, brain imaging studies have been absolutely crucial here. They show that when we listen to music we enjoy, it strongly activates the limbic system, these ancient parts of the brain responsible for emotion, motivation, and social bonding.
And the key finding is that music triggers a release of dopamine in the nucleus accumbens.
Yes, which is essentially the brain's main pleasure and motivation hub. But it's when the dopamine is released that's so interesting. It's not just when you hear the part you like.
It's before, right. It's in the anticipation.
Exactly. A massive dopamine spike happens before the expected emotional peak of the song, sometimes 10 to 15 seconds ahead of time. The brain is rewarding itself for successfully predicting the coming emotional payoff.
So the anticipation can be even more pleasurable than the arrival.
In many cases, yes. Music provides this incredibly rich series of predictable tension and release cycles, which perfectly hijacks the reward system that evolved to motivate us toward finding food or a mate.
That's astonishing. Our brains are treating musical pleasure almost as seriously as they treat the drive for fundamental survival. It really explains why we invest so much time and energy into it.
Okay, so we've got a handle on the how. We see how physics and biology create the scaffolding for music. But the biggest question, the real mystery, is still the why.
The puzzling, non-adaptive nature of music.
Right. From a strictly survival of the fittest perspective, music doesn't seem to do anything. You can't hunt with it, you can't build a shelter with it. And unlike language, you can't use it to say, watch out, there's a lion behind that rock.
It doesn't transmit specific propositional information, and yet it's not only universal, it's profoundly ancient. We have archaeological evidence of this.
The bone flutes.
Carved bone flutes, made from the wing bones of vultures that date back over 40,000 years, found in caves in Europe from the Upper Paleolithic.
So our distant ancestors, who were living in a world where survival was a daily struggle, were taking the time and effort to create musical instruments. It predates agriculture, it predates writing, it predates cities. So why? Why did humans dedicate precious cognitive and physical resources to this seemingly non-essential skill?
And that question has led to 4 major competing theories for why music exists at all.
The first, and the one that goes all the way back to Darwin himself, is the sexual selection hypothesis.
Music as a fitness display, like a peacock's tail.
Exactly. Darwin proposed that music functions as this highly sophisticated, costly display that demonstrates genetic quality and cognitive competence to potential mates.
It makes sense. To be a skillful musician, you need a complex brain, you need precise motor control, you need good memory. You're basically signaling, I have good genes and a healthy, high-functioning nervous system.
And there is evidence for this. In many cultures, musical ability does correlate with attractiveness, and music is a huge part of courtship rituals.
But there are some pretty big holes in that theory, aren't there?
There are. The most obvious counterpoint is, if music is primarily for mate attraction, why do both sexes make music? Why do children, long before they're sexually mature, engage in music?
And why is so much the world's music completely non-romantic? Lullabies, funeral songs, work songs, sacred hymns.
Those non-sexual contexts are very difficult to explain if the main evolutionary driver was courtship. Which brings us to what is perhaps the most popular theory today.
The social bonding hypothesis. Music as group glue.
This theory argues that music evolved primarily to strengthen group cohesion and increase cooperation. And that is a massive survival advantage for a hypersocial species like ours.
So what's the mechanism there? How does it actually work?
The power is in synchronization. When a group of people sing or dance together, it forces them to coordinate their actions precisely in time.
Yeah.
That synchronized movement has a powerful effect. It aligns their neural and physiological rhythms. Heartbeats start to align, brain waves can synchronize, and crucially, it triggers a release of endorphins and oxytocin, the bonding hormone, simultaneously across the whole group.
So it's a chemical and neurological binding agent. It literally makes a group of individuals feel like a single unified entity.
It's a technology for rapidly manufacturing trust and pro-social behavior. And the evidence here is very strong. Studies show that when groups engage in musical activity together, they cooperate more effectively in subsequent tasks.
This theory also explains all those other contexts, like work songs and military marches. If your tribe sang together, you were simply a more cohesive, coordinated, and therefore more effective unit. You outcompeted the tribe that didn't.
Exactly. It also explains why in most traditional cultures, the emphasis is on full participation. Everyone sings, everyone dances, rather than the passive listening we often see in the modern West.
Okay, theory 3. This one suggests music might not have a direct adaptive function at all, but is instead a powerful byproduct. The cognitive development theory.
Right. This view argues that music is a kind of beneficial side effect of other cognitive systems that evolve for essential reasons like language or complex motor planning.
But practicing music gives those systems an intense workout.
A very intense workout. Playing music is like cross-training for the brain. It demands and develops superior auditory processing, fine motor control, memory, and what we call executive function, multitasking, planning, switching between tasks.
And modern research really backs this up. We know musical training in kids can enhance language skills and mathematical abilities.
It's like a catalyst for brain development using pattern sound. The debate is whether that cognitive enhancement provided a strong enough evolutionary pressure on its own, or if it's just a fortunate side benefit.
And that brings us to the fourth and maybe the most intriguing hypothesis, the mother-infant communication idea. This one suggests music might actually be older than language.
This is a really compelling one, and it's tied to our unique evolutionary path. Human babies are born incredibly helpless and need intensive care for years. This created a huge selective pressure for a powerful, reliable mother-infant bonding mechanism.
And music, or something like it, was that mechanism.
Well, think about motherese or baby talk. Across every single culture ever studied, mothers instinctively talk to their infants using this simplified speech with exaggerated melodic pitch contours, a slower tempo, and tons of repetition.
It sounds musical.
It is musical. It's melodic communication that's optimized for bonding and for soothing an infant's nervous system long before the words themselves have any meaning.
And lullabies are the ultimate expression of this. They are universal, and they all share those calming features: slow tempo, simple melodies, and those descending pitch contours we talked about.
They literally regulate the baby's emotional states, strengthening the attachment bond and even slowing the heart rate.
So the theory is that the brain machinery that evolved for this incredibly important mother-infant bonding processing, organized emotional sound, was later expanded and repurposed for other social functions.
For courtship, group rituals, storytelling, everything else. In this view, music is the ancestral form of communication, focused on emotion and social connection, from which our fact-based propositional language later branched off.
It's amazing. All these theories, whether it's sexual selection or infant bonding, they all seem to converge on the same conclusion. Music exists because we are a fundamentally social species.
So we've established these rigid boundaries set by physics and biology, but we have to spend time on the extraordinary diversity that exists within those boundaries.
This is where human culture takes that universal blueprint and just runs with it in wildly creative ways.
Exactly. If the constraints are universal, the execution is cultural.
A perfect place to see this is with scales and tuning systems. The octave is non-negotiable, but how many steps you put inside it, that is definitely up for cultural debate.
Our brains are biologically wired to prefer those simple ratios, but culture decides which specific frequencies to highlight. So in the West, we settled on dividing the octave into 12 equal semitones.
The equal temperament system.
Right. It's a brilliant mathematical compromise, really. It makes complex harmony and changing keys much easier.
But to a Western ear, a lot of other traditions can sound, well, out of tune.
And that's because they've made different choices. Take Indian classical music. It doesn't use 12 fixed notes. Conceptually, it works with 22 srutis, or microtones, within the octave.
So they're using the notes between our notes.
They are. A trained performer will bend and slide between pitches in these very subtle, nuanced ways. To our ears, it might sound a little sharp or flat, but that microtonal variation is where all the emotional weight of the music is carried.
And what about something like Javanese gamelan music?
Gamelan orchestras in Indonesia use these unique tuning systems like slendro and palag, which are based on non-equal divisions of the octave. This means the intervals between the notes are all slightly different sizes.
So an instrument is really only in tune with itself and its own orchestra.
Pretty much. If you took a gamelan orchestra from one village and tried to have them play with an orchestra from the next village over, they would sound dissonant together. Their standard is local and cultural, not universal.
And the sources point out that experienced Indonesian listeners can hear these subtle tuning differences between regions, distinctions that a Western listener literally cannot perceive without years of training.
And that's the key interaction between biology and culture. We are all born as universal listeners, able to distinguish pretty much any pitch difference.
But that window closes.
It does. Over the first year of life, our brain tunes itself to become an expert in the specific musical and linguistic sounds that are relevant in our environment. Culture prunes the possibilities that biology provides.
That same diversity shows up dramatically in rhythm and meter. We all have rhythm, but how we organize time varies hugely.
Western popular music relies heavily on simple meters grouping beats into 2s, 3s, or 4s. It's very straightforward.
But elsewhere, the complexity just explodes.
It really does. Many African drumming traditions are famous for their use of polyrhythms. Multiple, conflicting rhythmic patterns all being played at the same time. You might have one drummer playing a pattern of 3 against another playing a pattern of 4.
And the goal is this dense, interlocking rhythmic fabric.
Exactly. It's about rhythmic density, not a simple forward march. And then you have Indian classical music with its elaborate tala cycles.
The rhythmic frameworks.
Which can be incredibly long and complex. They might have cycles of 16 beats or 10 or even these additive meters like 11 beats to a measure, which can feel very irregular to an untrained ear. The capacity for that complexity is universal, but the specific patterns are deeply cultural.
Another huge cultural difference is the role of harmony. The Western tradition, from Bach to Wagner, is just obsessed with the vertical stacking of notes, chords, and harmony.
And that obsession is culturally specific. It grew out of religious choral traditions and was enabled by that equal temperament tuning system we mentioned. Many other great traditions just don't prioritize harmony in the same way.
Like traditional Chinese music.
Which is primarily melodic. The focus is on a single, highly ornamented melody line, not on a progression of chords underneath it. In much of sub-Saharan Africa, the focus is on that dense rhythmic layering and call and response, with harmony being more of an incidental result of overlapping voices.
And Indian raga music.
That's all about the intense microtonal elaboration of a melody, the raga, which unfolds over a constant, fixed drone in the background. The entire emotional and intellectual journey is horizontal in the melody, not vertical in the chords.
Just a profoundly different way of thinking about music. Which brings us back to the acquisition mystery. How do kids absorb these incredibly complex cultural rules so easily?
It is stunning. It really suggests there are specialized learning mechanisms at play. By age 5 or 6, a child has internalized the basic scale and rhythmic grammar of their culture without any formal instruction.
It's a perfect parallel to language acquisition.
It is. You don't need grammar lessons to learn to speak. You just absorb the rules through exposure. And you absorb your musical grammar the same way.
Which suggests there are these critical, sensitive periods for musical learning in the brain.
Absolutely. The fact that a skill like perfect pitch almost always develops in very early childhood, or not at all, strongly supports that idea.
So we start as these universal listeners, and then the culture we're born into shapes and tunes our brain to specialize in the distinctions that matter locally, whether that's 12 semitones or 22 microtones.
That developmental path, innate biological capacity, sculpted by intense cultural exposure, is the perfect summary of how we become musical beings.
Okay, as we start to pull all of this together, we have to talk about the other great cognitive phenomenon that defines us. Language. Music and language. They share so much sound, pitch, rhythm, but are they the same system?
That's a huge ongoing debate. Brain imaging shows a lot of overlap. Both music and language processing light up regions like Broca's area, which we used to think was just for speech, but is also active during complex musical tasks.
Suggesting they share some resources for processing structure and sequence.
But they also show clear signs of being separate. You can see this in certain neurological disorders.
Right. Amusia or tone deafness. People who literally cannot distinguish melodies or sing in tune, but their language ability is perfectly normal.
And conversely, you have cases of severe aphasia, where someone loses the ability to speak due to brain trauma, but they can still sing fluently and process music. So while they overlap, the core machinery seems to be distinct.
So how do we reconcile that? The overlap and the separation.
The leading theory right now is the proto-language theory. It suggests that music and language actually share a common evolutionary ancestor.
A kind of pre-human communication system.
Exactly. One that was probably highly rhythmic and melodic, more focused on conveying emotion and social states than specific facts. And over time, this single system diverged and specialized.
Language branched off to become specialized for propositional communication, conveying facts, details, abstract ideas.
And music retained and elaborated on that ancestral function. Emotional and social communication, conveying feelings, managing group arousal, building bonds.
Which explains why song lyrics are so much easier to remember than just spoken text. You're leveraging both systems at once.
You're embedding the factual information from the language system into the ancient, emotional, and repetitive framework of the music system.
Okay, so we've established music is universal to humans. But is it uniquely human? Let's talk about animal music, because the research here is really challenging that idea.
It absolutely is. We're finding that some animal vocalizations have complex musical structures that they use for core social functions.
Birdsong is the classic example, right?
It's the clearest parallel. Many songbirds produce these elaborate songs with distinct pitches, rhythms, and structure. Crucially, the songs are learned from older males, which is cultural transmission. And the quality of the song directly impacts mating success, which is sexual selection.
They even have regional dialects.
They do, just like human accents. It's a remarkably similar system.
But it gets even wilder with some mammals.
Humpback whales. They produce these incredibly complex songs that can last for 30 minutes. They have a clear hierarchical structure with themes and variations that are statistically organized, much like human grammar.
And the truly mind-bending part is that the song evolves over time as a collective.
Yes, all the males in a given population sing the same basic song. But that song gradually changes over months and years, with new melodic phrases replacing old ones. It's like they're all participating in a slow-motion global jam session.
And closer to home, evolutionarily speaking, there are the gibbons.
Gibbons, a type of small ape, sing these highly coordinated duets with their mates to defend their territory and reinforce their pair bond. It requires the same kind of precise auditory motor planning that we use when we sing harmony in a choir.
So the fundamental building blocks organized to pitch and rhythm for social bonding and sexual display might be shared across many species. What's unique to us is maybe just the extreme cultural elaboration of those systems.
That's one interpretation. The other is that it's a stunning case of convergent evolution, different species independently arriving at similar solutions to the shared problems of social life.
Finally, let's look to the future. Modern technology is giving us incredible new tools to investigate all of this.
A huge one is the Natural History of Song project. It's this massive global effort to use computational analysis on thousands of recordings from diverse cultures all over the world.
And what are these massive data sets showing us?
They're confirming deep statistical links between a song structure and its social function. For example, they've shown that lullabies, worldwide, share acoustic features like slower tempos and lower pitches that are statistically distinct from dance music, which in turn is distinct from healing songs.
So the sound is being functionally optimized for its purpose everywhere.
Exactly. We're also seeing AI and machine learning being used to analyze musical grammars. And AI can analyze millions of melodies and start to identify the unwritten rules and predictable patterns that we follow without even realizing it.
And then, the deepest level of all, genetics.
Yes. Twin studies and large-scale genetic analyses are searching for the heritability of musical traits. And they're finding that musical ability does seem to run in families, beyond what you can explain by environment alone, pointing to a real, hardwired biological foundation. #outro.
So to bring this all together, what we've uncovered is that music isn't some happy accident of culture. It's this product of a perfect intersection.
Physics gives us the raw materials, the octave, the consonant intervals.
Biology gives us the tools and the processing architecture, the rhythm of our bodies, the constraints of our breath, our brain's predictive machinery, and emotional wiring.
And then culture takes that universal kit of parts and builds something unique. It fills in the specific details, the number of notes, the complexity of the rhythms, the role of harmony.
It's universal because the constraints of being a human living in this physical universe are universal. We all have the same basic brain and body, and the sound waves work the same for all of us.
So certain forms of musical organization were, in a way, simply inevitable.
And I think the ultimate takeaway for you listening to this is that music's real power isn't in a rational explanation. It's in its ability to bypass our conscious thought and operate on these much deeper, older levels. It's activating ancient reward systems and social bonding circuits that existed long before we ever had language. The question of why we all make such similar music is really inseparable from the question, what does it mean to be human? We are the musical species. We turn organized sound into community.
So the next time you hear any piece of music, a pop song, a symphony, an ancient chant, just take a moment.
Consider how much of what you're hearing is a specific cultural choice, and how much of it is mandated by the fixed laws of physics and the inescapable 40,000-year-old wiring of your brain.
And that underlying universality is a powerful reminder that beneath all our surface differences, all the complex rhythms and strange tunings, we all share this fundamental source of joy and grief and connection that's written into the very math of the universe.